So how is everybody this evening? Alive and kicking. That's a very enthusiastic response. But I'm glad you're alive and kicking. So can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Excellent. So I'm doing this talk on testing activities and continuous delivery. And I'm not going to talk about any tools. So yeah. So I'll be disappointing a few people, I'm sure. But just a little bit about me. I started off as a programmer. I did that for about 6 years before I moved into testing. And I really like testing. It's a passion with me. I think because I like to ask a lot of questions. That's what QA stands for, by the way. Question asker. So all your testers, how many are testers in the room? Anybody? Yay, a few. How many programmers? Okay, probably a few more programmers than not. To me, testing is just way more fun. So as I said, as he said, I do a lot of speaking and training, and I do a lot of writing. 3 books under my belt. Co-authored, of course, because I couldn't imagine doing it by myself. But lately, what we've been talking about is testing in DevOps. So Lisa Crispin is my co-author. And she's got a blog out that or an organization that she does, testingindevops.org. And she has lots of great posts, and I really encourage people to read it if they haven't already. So today, I know you guys know what DevOps is and what CD is and what CD is. But I'll kind of go through that a little bit. But I want to talk mostly about product delivery. What does it mean to product delivery? And then what does it mean, or how does it mean what we test? And even what a tester's role is. Because a lot of times I hear, we're going and we're moving to DevOps, and so we don't need any testers. Anybody hear that? Yeah. Right? Let's kind of step back a little bit. If you think about a flower, I really like this quote, but if you think about a flower or a plant and it's not blooming, what do? You don't tickle it to make it do something. You don't make it adjust it. You fix the environment, right? That's what you fix. Now, if you change a little bit here and a little bit there, add some fertilizer, the next time maybe it'll bloom. That's what the whole DevOps movement is supposed to be, as well as agile, right? We're trying to fix the environment so that we can deliver more effortlessly. If we fix the environment, change will happen naturally. That's really what we want to do. So when I hear DevOps, and I'm going to talk about what I think DevOps is, people get confused between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. We give them both the same acronym. How can you not, right? Testing in production. How many people know what that is? How many people are afraid of testing in production? Shouldn't be, right? But it scares a lot of people who don't understand that really it is about monitoring your usage. Because testing in production years ago used to mean people going in and making transactions and doing things in production, which is not really what we're meaning. We get to do it in a much safer way. So I hear build pipeline, deployment type pipeline, but mostly I hear people talking about the tools. That's the first question that gets asked. What tools do you use to build? What tools do you use to deploy? What tools do you use? And it's really not about that at all. Now, I do not think, no matter how many times I see a job ad for a DevOps engineer, or come join my DevOps team, I go, no, that's not the whole idea, right? It isn't, I think, as I trip over something, the idea, it's a culture. We want to change things. Let's think about operations. Let's bring it into our development. Let's think about security. Let's bring it in. Do we need a new name? DevSecOps? Just have, where do we stop? It's about collaboration, plain and simple. Let's bring the people in we need to, right? To me, DevOps is about these things, small batches. Agile is about this stuff too, right? DevOps is the new name. But it's about building quality in. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put it into our process. We're trying to put it into our product. We're trying to get our stuff, whatever stuff you may be having, out into our customers' hands as safely as we can. But we still want to be thinking about all of that, how do we get better? How do we continuously improve? And to do that, we need to build that in. We need to have continuous testing. Now, continuous delivery to me it's a set of capabilities, right? When we look at the book, how many people have read Accelerate? A few, not everybody, right? But it's a set of capabilities. If you look at it, it doesn't say anything about tools. It's a set of capabilities that allow us to get our changes into our users' hands. And that's the important thing. So we really want to think about what that means. These are the 5 key principles that they identify. What's the number 1? Build quality in. How do you do that? Right? Everybody here is doing their share. How many people, and I want you to think about it for a second, can you articulate what you do in your job to contribute to quality of your product? So anybody here has ever thought that? What do you do personally to contribute to quality of your product? You should be able to articulate that. Think about it. The small batches, right? That's to reduce risk. Testing activities, that the third one is computers perform repetitive tasks. That's those automated tests, whether it's unit tests or any of the other tests which we put into our build pipeline. Computers do it really well. But there's a whole lot of other things that computers do not do very well at all. And that's the critical thinking, right? So we really need that part of it as well. So get the computers to do the repetitive stuff and let the other people on the team do the rest. Now, and there is other things. We'll talk about that in a minute. So continuous improvement. Constantly getting better. Now, the first one was build in quality. The last one is everyone is responsible. Does everybody agree with those two? Yeah? I see some people going, not sure. Absolutely. Absolutely is. We want to reduce the cycle time. That's what we're trying to do. And so a lot of times people view testing as a bottleneck. So the first thing they want to do is cut the cycle time by reducing the testers, which is kind of backwards in my mind, because I'm thinking testers do more than testing at the end or anything else. A lot of times our cycle time is long because of the lead time. Can help to reduce that. We can help to reduce rework. Testing early prevents rework. And then the continuous deployment, of course, is every single piece goes into production. Might not go live, but it's in production. Now, these things work, but there's lots of reasons why they work, right? Part of it is the faster resolution of problems. If we have really fast feedback, we can fix those problems very quickly, whether it's in the development cycle or it's already in production. we want to be thinking about how fast can we get that. Things like less complexity because we're doing smaller chunks. Right? The fast feedback. Always, always, always thinking about that. Now, we can innovate, but we can only innovate if we have time to think about it. And that's what all of the automation and the faster delivery, hopefully we're building in slack time so that we can actually think about how to do things better. If we're always busy doing the same old, then we're not going to. We want to be able to monitor that customer usage to be able to say, hey, are we really doing the right thing? If we're not paying attention to that, we're not going to know. None of those things are being told by automation or by tools. It's by people analyzing, people looking at it. Right? Now, I want to go back into the product delivery. When we think about our product delivery, it's more than the set of tools. It's knowing what our product is and what problem it's trying to solve. It's about an organizational cultural change, right? Our cross-functional teams can do so many things, but we also need to have the whole organization behind us. Teams can't do it by themselves if they don't have the leadership to help them through, right? One of the things we want to think about is not only the features that we're delivering, because we can deliver features faster, we can get really good at it. We can keep those features just plugging through that pipeline. But if we do not think about the quality, what we're doing is we're delivering those features, but also the bugs faster. And I don't think that's the aim, to get more bugs faster. It's important to be able to recover from it, but there's things we can do to keep that from happening in the first time. Now, think about the quality in your product. Let's think about coffee. Well, we're here in the UK. Maybe tea. Beer? Your choice, right? Think about that cup of coffee. I'll use coffee because I quite like coffee. Right? Most people think a quality cup of coffee, the beans, the roasting, maybe the pretty design. But it starts much earlier than that. If we go back to fixing our environment, how we think about things, right? The coffee beans, where are they planted? What altitude are they planted at? What kind of air are they looking at? Who picks them? How are they picked? What time of year are they picked? Are they picked at the right time? Are they the right bean? And then we can start thinking about how do we roast it? How do we grind it? How do we make the coffee? Comes down to the barista making that coffee. Does he or she know what she's doing? Can she put that pretty design on the top? I can't. Doesn't work. But that cup of coffee you hold, that beer you hold, it comes from a lot of different things, but it starts with your environment. Our products are like that. If we aren't building products that satisfy somebody's need, we can put all the features we want, but they're not doing anybody any good. We should be thinking about how to delight our customers. Now, oops, I should have been doing that. Oh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. One of the ways to start thinking about your environment is to start thinking about testing differently, right? Testing is not a phase. It happens throughout. From the very beginning, the first time your product owner brings a new feature to you, start testing that. Start thinking about what does that mean? Can we solve it in a different way? When we think about our whole team, when we first started thinking about agile, people usually talk about cross-functional teams, and they might have a programmer, a tester, a domain expert. My very first agile team had a support person, and this was 20 years ago. They had a support person. They weren't on the team all the time, but we worked with them very closely. So it's not something new. But now when we're talking whole team, who else do we need to include? We really do need to include operations and include security and include anybody else that can help us think about product quality. Doesn't mean I have to work with them every day, but I need to think about them and understand what we should be doing. Now, testing is not a tester's problem. It is a team problem. So developers think testing all the time, even though I often hear, I don't want to test. But you do. You test all the time. You should be thinking about testability, because testability is what allows you to do that pipeline, to be able to automate and get a lot of that things through. Testers, well, we ask lots of questions. We think the what ifs. We sometimes get, a bad rap for our critical thinking skills. But it's important, because those what if questions are often the things that get you in the end. I believe that multiple skill sets, using everybody's skill sets, is what's going to make us stronger as a team. I really do. Now, if we go back to continuous delivery and thinking about how we test, what we measure, it's a little bit different. We want to change it up. So rather than measuring bugs, let's measure throughput, but not how many bugs go faster. What can we do as a team to get it out, right? I think that one of the best things that has come out of the DevOps movement, by the way, is a benefit to testers. Stable test environments. It's something that testers have struggled with forever, but now it's part of the process. It needs to be there. It's not even questioned anymore for people practicing continuous delivery. It's part of what we do. So the environments have to be there. We have to think about the fast feedback, right? The automation, but automation isn't any good if it's not effective. So these are all things that are changing from a testing perspective. Monitoring production usage, that's a testing activity, because we're testing to see how it's used. Doesn't mean a tester has to do it, right? We're observing, it changes. Now, this is one of my favorite diagrams from the last, I think Dan Ashby did this, put it out about a year ago. Anybody know? I don't know, I've been using it for a while. So you get your typical DevOps infinite loop, right? And in that DevOps infinite loop, there was no mention of test at all. Just kind of got forgot. So when Dan was asked the question, he said, well, that's just silly. It's everywhere. We test everywhere, right? In our planning, every time we ask a question and say, hey, so can you give me an example of that? Does that mean this? Are we talking the same thing? That's testing ideas. We're testing assumptions, right? We go through that loop, and of course, when we're branching and coding and merging, we're going to be testing in there. Every code review you do is a test, right? Start thinking about testing differently because we test all the time. These are just some example testing activities, right? How many people practice BDD or acceptance test-driven development or specification by example? Anybody? Only 2 people, 3 people? Really? Only 3 people, and all of you folks are practicing some form of guiding development with examples? Interesting. How many people don't know what I mean when I say that? A few. Right? So it just means giving examples, tests to the developers before they start coding. That's all, simple as that. Let's automate our tests from a business perspective before you start coding. Simple, right? Just like the little TDD code, write a unit test, code, right? Make a pass, red, green refactor. This is from a business perspective. It's testing early, is really what it's about. Now, there's lots of other kinds of tests that happen that aren't automated. I call them human-centric testing activities. Things like exploratory testing, right? Really hard to automate that, even if you have AI. You need somebody looking at it. You need somebody checking the product, because automation will only test the things you thought of. What about all the other stuff you didn't? And yeah, you can have your production users test it, your customers. What about 5 years ago? I heard James Whittaker say, he was for Google, and he stood up and said at a keynote, testing is dead. Fire all your testers. We'll let our users test. And I listened to him and I thought, that's fine for you. You work for Google. If I'm stupid enough to run off the edge into the ocean with Google Maps, I probably deserve it. But what about if you have a mission critical, something you're doing medical devices for? You're doing a heart monitor, right? Software for a heart monitor. Are you really going to have how many of you would be willing to test that? Yeah, we didn't want to test it. Would you be willing to test it? How about you? Probably not. So when we think about these things, we really have to think about your context. Is it okay for your users to test? Or will they lose $1 billion because the transaction went wrong? Can you recover from that? Context is everything. Really understand what that means, right? We can test the infrastructure, which you do, I'm sure. Anybody who how many are practicing continuous delivery here? Not everybody. Isn't that interesting? This is a continuous delivery group, right? Yeah. A continuous delivery wannabe group? Yeah. I think a lot of the hype is people want to be, but not everybody is. It's a good thing, but it takes a lot to get there, right? So really think about how you are continuously going to improve not only your code, but your tests. How can we get better? How can we think about our product quality? Now, Rob Meany, he lives in Ireland, and he's come up with this little idea. He calls it CODS, C-O-D-S. Controllability, observability, decomposability, and simplicity. And he talks about this in terms of continuous delivery. Controllability, the ability to identify and control the variables that influence the system behavior so that you can actually understand what it is, what you can do about it. And so how do we identify those things? It's people, right? What are the variables we're going to need to observe? They all tie in together. Observability, and I think the key to this one is to be able to observe usage from the production, but more importantly is, do we understand what we're looking at? Machines can't do that yet. Some of them try, but what's important? How do we determine what we should be looking at? How do we determine what's important? The D, decomposability. For continuous delivery to happen, we have to have small chunks that we can deliver. As long as we have a monolithic application, it's really hard to deliver in small chunks. So how can we decompose so that we can deliver those independently? Do we understand our system well enough to be able to deliver small slices independently? And then the last one, which I really think is probably the hardest, is simplicity. The ability to understand your system. So I've been teaching a course at Skills Matters this week, and one of the things that we keep talking about is how do we deliver small testable slices. And over again I hear teams and people coming to take my course to say, but we can't. Our system is too complex. They don't even have a starting point to even begin to think about delivering small chunks. Now, this is an example pipeline, right? It's got, I can't read it on my screen because it's too small. So we've got unit testing, static analysis, integration testing, GUI end-to-end testing, deploying. The blue ones are manual steps in this example, right? Because maybe we don't want to automatically deploy to your test environment. I like to pull. I like to take the last good build and pull and put it on my test environment, because half the time I'm in the middle of a test, and if somebody mucks it up because they've deployed something new, I have to start all over again. So there may be times we actually want to do manual steps. But we have, stress environment performance, exploratory testing, staging. We start looking at this. That's an awful lot of testing activities. So these orange, the ones I highlighted in orange or yellow on the screen, they're testing activities, right? That's a lot of testing. I've added to the original one these 2 extra spots. You probably can't see from me. The questions and get examples at the beginning of the pipeline, because I think that's a very important part. And then at the end, we have to observe and monitor. The pipeline doesn't end when we deploy to production, right? We need to be thinking about those things. Testing is at the heart of continuous delivery. I truly and absolutely believe that. So if you fire all your testers, then the programmers are going to have to do all the testing, which is okay. But be prepared, right? Be prepared to ask those questions. Now, the enablers that allow us or enable us to do that, I guess, is things like feature toggles. Things like collaboration, working side by side. Thinking about security and all of those other quality attributes early so that we can codify them and get them into the system. One of the biggest enablers allowing us to go that quickly is that anybody can pick up a testing task. I think these are important things. We have to think about things like test data. Everybody's favorite subject. Probably the hardest thing to do with automation, right? When do we use mocks? When do we actually use real data? When do we, how do we set up? How do we tear down? These are things we have to think about. And I have a slide in twice, don't I? Interesting. Testing. Testers is different now than it used to be. There was a time when testing was thought of as following a script. How many testers here have done that? Manual regression testing, following a script, checking. Wasn't that so much fun? How many are still doing it? Yes. Thank you for being honest, right? Yeah, I don't see it very much anymore. Every once in a while I'll go into a company and I will still see it. It's not happening anymore. Testers don't do that anymore. The testers I see are thinking testers. They have found new ways to work. They question way more. And to me, it's a really exciting time because we get to learn so many new things. We can help the programmers instead of being that bottleneck, right? But it means learning new things, like how does the continuous integration and the pipeline work? What is our build-merge strategy? How does that affect testing? What is the risk involved, right? Can I help define the pipeline? Can I help define what tests go in which environment? Can I be one of those people that help find out what is useful information? What information might we want to look at? What are the dependencies? What are the impacts to the rest of the system? Now, as part of that cross-functional team, we're going to ask those questions early, and hopefully they prevent defects in the code. I think that every time somebody picks up a new story or a new feature, especially new stories, is ask the question, how am I going to test that? I don't care if it comes from a tester, a product owner, a programmer. How am I going to test that? If we don't know the answer to that question, maybe we shouldn't be doing that particular story, right? So, thinking about quality attributes. Quality attributes can cover a range of things. We usually talk about security or performance load. Those are the easy ones. Well, maybe not be easy, but those are the ones people think about. We think about recoverability these days. So recoverability in the fact, if we get a bug into production, how fast can we recover? Either backing out this change or switching it over or putting a bug or a fix out really fast. But recoverability can mean different things. For example, I worked on a trading system once. One of the things we could not do was lose a trade or an order. So if somebody pulled the plug or tripped over it or did something or, lightning hit our building, no matter what, we had to be able to recreate those trades and orders. I can't do that if it's a bug in production. I have to be able to prevent that or be able to mitigate that risk. So recoverability can be one of those things, but there's probably a list of about 100 different quality attributes. Do you know which are important to you? Do you know what are important to your system, to your products? Have you asked that question? Have you thought about it? Right? So if you have testers working in your group or you're testing, really think about how can you be involved at every single step. What can you do to add value? Is it at the beginning? Is it helping with fast feedback? Pairing with the programmer? Right? Ever before we commit even. Really thinking about what is the best use of my time? How can we get this information and this feedback quickly? This is how your environment is going to get better. So I'm just going to kind of leave you with a couple of things. To be able to grow a culture of quality, to be able to address your environment, you have to have that environment where the team feels safe to try new things, to innovate, to building that quality in. Make time for learning, because you are, especially those who are not doing continuous delivery, I'm guessing that your learning curve is very high as you go. So you're going to have to think about things like building relationships with outside people, your operations team, your performance team, who's ever doing their security. Thinking about how do we bring that into our team. Really thinking about how do we simplify our application, our architecture, really. How can we get those small batches so that we can test them? One of the strongest recommendations that I give to people is visualize. So that example pipeline that I had, everybody has a pipeline. They just might not know it. It might not be automated all the way through. So start by taking pieces of paper and thinking about, what do? We do our unit tests. We commit our code. The CI builds it. That runs the unit tests. Where does it go now? We have a manual deploy to the development environment. We kick off a smoke test. What happens next? Take pieces of paper, write it out as a team, and figure out what your pipeline is. Put it up on the wall and say, where are our roadblocks? What's preventing us from doing better? What's preventing us from doing the next step? And then work on that. But the first thing to do is to visualize it, because then you can talk about it. And then design your small experiments. So, yeah, we want to make, well, what do we want to do, right? So what's your hypothesis? We think that our tests will run 50% faster if we do this. And then decide how you're going to measure it. And then follow up. Experiments. What are you going to do? What's your goal? What do you think is going to happen? But more importantly, how are you going to measure it, and how will you know you succeeded? Right. So think about doing an experiment rather than just going out and do stuff. Create a hypothesis. Now, the final slide that I have is to fix our environment in our organization. Teams can do wonderful things on their own, but we really need to think about the organization. How are we as an organization going to transform? How are we as an organization and everybody in it going to help us be successful? Because that's how you fix the environment, to make it a safe place to experiment, to get better. And that's pretty much all I have to say today. Here's references, everything that I've been talking about today. I do want to call out special attention to the very bottom one, A Practical Guide to Testing in DevOps by Katrina Clokey, available on LeanPub. She talks a lot about I mentioned building relationships, but she's got a chapter on that. And I think it's a really critical piece to it that we don't talk about enough. And last but not least is just my sales slide, I guess, right?